it's a very perilous time that we're living in. Very exciting, but very perilous at the same time.
It is very exciting. And the possibilities are better than they've ever been,
Yeah.
but the risks also increase with the possibilities.
Hmm.
And we need to try and balance that and mitigate, the negatives. I have to believe that the people now that are working on it that I've researched seem to be going in a direction that is for the good.
Mm.
But nothing stays on the same train forever. There's always one that takes a side train, side route. So until that happens, I think we're in good shape.
Sure, sure.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Verbenkov, and welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. And this is going to be episode number 156. And today we're going to be focusing on two of what I think are the most interesting, or some of the most interesting technologies that are out there today and how they are overlapping. And that is artificial intelligence and brain-computer interfaces. But before that, a quick point of housekeeping. So as you'll probably notice, there is no video of this pre-introduction. I am currently down in El Salvador again. For those of you that are following the podcast, I've been down here a couple times. It's quite a Bitcoin and cryptocurrency country. So for those of you that are interested in that tech, there'll be a couple more episodes of that coming out soon. And maybe another solo episode where I talk about the changes in this really fascinating country. Again, it's not 100% connected to emerging technology, but because we cover a number of different impacts on society that emerging technologies have on the podcast, it's still quite relevant. So more on that later when I come back to Canada and have a little bit of time to think about, again, some of the really interesting things that are coming up and happening, whether it's policies or just various changes in the country. Very interesting stuff. So yeah, looking forward to talk and share about that in the upcoming episodes. But back to the topic today, again, what I think is some of the most interesting things to talk about today, AI and BCI. So I have a very, very interesting guest that is on the podcast today. I'll talk about Bruce Randall in a couple minutes. But just wanted to look over some of the things that we talk about on the podcast today to kind of give a sense of where the conversation goes. And then, of course, introduce the guest and then move right into the actual interview itself. So in today's episode, we explore the, I think, intriguing intersection of AI and BCI technologies with a real focus on the concept of the AI-human paradox, which my guest will get into in the actual discussion, but also how brain-computer interface technology is reshaping our understanding of this specific relationship between AI and human beings. We'll also dive into some of the latest developments in AI and, of course, BCI that are set to transform, I would say, our daily lives much more significantly than maybe any other aspect of the world, but also we touch on how it's going to be impacting our work environments. And, of course, can't have an episode on this without discussing some of the ethical challenges and the concerns that these technologies bring about. I've had a number of discussions with several of you on previous episodes that talk about BCI technology, and of course the ethical concern around that are certainly kind of at the forefront of many of your thoughts and mine as well, so we definitely touch on that in today's episode. We'll then also hear about real-world examples, so kind of make this idea a little bit more tangible in all of our minds, where AI and BCI have successfully enhanced human capabilities. We talk about, of course, Elon Musk's Neuralink and the recent news that came out of there. And then also not just about how this enhances human capabilities, but also the goal or the idea that this can greatly improve the quality of life for all of us that are going to be using this technology in the future. We'll also discuss strategies for effectively harnessing the potential of these technologies and kind of envision the future of AI and BCI collaboration with a specific emphasis on ensuring that these advancements are both beneficial and, of course, equitable for society, because there's certainly some issues and definitely some concerns about the first group of people that would be able to essentially have this technology implemented into their brains, and they would get a dramatic benefit or boost that would allow them to acquire more resources and wealth compared to all of us that aren't necessarily doing that. So this episode offers a deep dive into the future of AI, BCI, and the evolving potential of human technology integration. So my guest today is Bruce Randall. He is a thought leader in AI technology and business innovation with over 25 years of experience as a fractional C-level executive and consultant. He's currently working on a book titled The AI Human Paradox, which explores the intersection of AI, human enhancement, and the regulatory challenges that come with rapid technological advancements. Bruce is deeply concerned with the future of work and the displacement of jobs due to AI, and he advocates for proactive strategies to prepare for these changes. His unique perspective is also shaped by his personal experiences with meditation and belief codes, adding a holistic dimension to his approach to AI and human potential, which comes about in the discussion that we have today. I hope that all of you enjoy the discussion as much as I did. As usual, it is just such a pleasure to have great and knowledgeable guests come onto the podcast that add their insights to the kind of podcast collection of understanding of the emerging technologies and how they are reshaping the future. Great. Well, hi there, Bruce. Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today. It's great to talk to somebody again about artificial intelligence, but I think what we talked about before, this merger of brain-computer interface and where AI kind of falls in that, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think it's very scary for many other people. So great to have you on to discuss these things and get your insights into where things are headed.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be here. The BCI topic is moving very fast and ever changing. So it's a great topic to discuss today.
Yeah, and I think it's also topical because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last week or two, there's been a couple of new announcements from Neuralink, which of course is not the only company out there, but it's the one that gets most of the marketing and most of the attention. So yeah, it's good to have you on for a topical discussion today. I guess before we dive into the actual content, what made you interested in getting involved in AI and thinking about BCI and the future of humanity and work and all these wonderful things that we'll be talking about today?
It's a good question. I initially got interested in AI when I was selling AI. Yeah. And the more I learned about it, the more with my consciousness background, the more questions that came up about the bridge. And I got so interested that I took a course at MIT for data science to understand the back end of it. Gave me a holistic view. And then what was happening with brain-chip interface and the potential connections just fascinated me. So I've done a lot of deep diving on that.
Good. Yeah, it's I think most people are now starting to get aware that this is actually a technology that's whether it's fully available and useful today, or whether it's in 5 to 10 years or something like that. But I think people even that aren't familiar with technology or working with technology, living and breathing technology like I and some of my peers are, they're starting to comprehend this technology is there and it's coming, right? So whether, and we'll touch on this later on, whether all human beings are going to be implanted with these kinds of chips, or whether it's only going to be a subsection of humans, or that there's going to be some sort of retaliation against this. I think it's starting to infiltrate the public consciousness, which is it's a fascinating time to be alive to see what's transpiring.
Really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So you have this book coming out. Do you want to discuss a little bit about what you mean, AI Human Paradox, specifically what you mean by this paradox? I think it's a great place to start. It's a bit of a catchy title. What do you mean by this paradox? I think it's a great place to start the conversation off.
Well, the paradox that I see is we've got the chip in the brain right now, and there's a couple different ways of doing it, but it's there. And the person that got the chip can operate a computer cursor with his mind without touching anything. So now you've enabled a consciousness that the body naturally has that's been enhanced by the computer to bring it full force and full strength. And to me, that's very interesting because that crosses the border of something that we should do naturally that was just automatically there with the chip. And the paradox is, as we go down this BCI road that we're on, and currently, if you fill out an app on Neuralink and can afford it, you too can have a chip. So there's no discrimination other than money and whether you fit the profile. As far as the timing goes, I think that it's going to be mainstream within the next decade. But because it's working so quickly, it's hard to say where it's going to land. Because to your point, it depends on, the resistance and the things that haven't happened yet and when they will happen. But that's the paradox. The paradox is, are we going to be competing with people with AI chips down the road? And the people that can't afford it, are they going to be disadvantaged because the people that can't afford it, are getting the chips? And so there's many, many questions that come along with this. And that's what the book is about, to get people to think about what's coming instead of what's now, because you need to get prepared for it. And what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. Well, I as much as I love all the content and all the topics on this podcast, I think this is one of the things that needs to be thought of substantially more. Especially, I would say, I've been listening to a lot of this Neuralink podcasts, and I think there's like a little bit of a panel discussion that came out maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that with Elon Musk and a lot of the developers, and a lot of the rhetoric that I hear in the conversations it's salesy, it's marketing, it's about correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know this a bit better than I do, but like some world records were already broken by the I'm forgetting the man's name, but the one who is kind of the main avatar, the exemplar of having the chip in his brain. He's he's quadriplegic, he's paralyzed, and yet he's still, with this chip in his brain, able to outcompete normal humans like me and you. And I think that this rhetoric that's being pushed is, well, if you get this chip, you will essentially become super abled. You'll become massively augmented, and you will be, to your point, you will be able to outcompete all of your competitors, all of your peers, because you have this chip in your brain, for lack of a better term. And it's concerning.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And in that podcast, they're talking about, well, if somebody loses 2 legs or 2 arms, Sophia, the robot with human-like characteristics, both verbal and visual, who has their own citizen card in Dubai and their own passport. That's the difference between where we are now and the future. And what we need to do is to talk about this and find out, if we're going to augment a human, how far can we go? How far is it allowed? And, is it able to go in the direction that is not friendly to mankind? Because there's no guardrails on it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we should definitely touch on regulations and some some BCI ethics czar. If you're in the States, they like to add a czar onto the end of many, like the border czar and these AI czars and things like that. I wanted to bring up one other kind of topical point that was, I just saw it, I think last week, where I believe it was a restaurant in Japan, and again the location might be wrong, but they had also people that were paralyzed or they had lost limbs, and they were given the opportunity to work by having, I can't remember I should have checked this before, but I believe it was a chip or it was some sort of external brain sensor where they're actually able to control a robot and they're able to be like waiters in a restaurant. So it's giving these people that are, essentially stuck at home all the time the opportunity to interact, in air quotes here, with human beings in a work environment and get paid for doing work like this. Maybe this is a conversation for later on, but or maybe this opens up the conversation. Like, what are your thoughts on that? I'm still a little bit, unsure about what I think about a situation like that, an example like that.
And that's more like an opinion. So if you go to a restaurant, do you like talking with the person and having a conversation, or would you want to talk with a brain of a person that's in a robot form, right? Some people wouldn't be comfortable with it. Some people would be, but it shows what the initial capabilities are. Because right now, as far as the bell curve goes, we're just going up the first side of it with all the hype and so forth. So you're finding all these capabilities that come out now, and whether they're adopted or not is up to the public and the financials on all that. But this is where we are, where we're trying to find, besides large language models, where AI fits in the public, what's accepted, what's not, and really it's up to acceptance, and there's many levels of that. And with Japan, I'd be interested to see how that goes after 3 months.
Yeah,
to see what they think about that.
Yeah. Well, I also assume that as the technology improves, these let's say, I don't know if they're bedridden, but the people that are stuck at home, their capabilities of interacting would also improve, right? As humanoid robots are improving, as BCI chips are improving, to me it seems like, I mentioned it before, we're living in a sci-fi age right now, where things that were only in people's ideas and minds and in the movies are now kind of turning into reality. It might be 5 to 10 years where people that are completely paralyzed are able to interact with humans, whether in a restaurant or at work, or who knows, maybe even play sports by controlling the avatar, if you will, which is, it's crazy. It really is.
Well, it's true, and in that podcast that Elon had and his engineers, they talked about putting the legs of Sophia on somebody if they lost the legs. And it's hard to do if they only lost one leg because they're imbalanced. But if they lost both legs, they could be one of the fastest runners, so to speak.
Right.
Or if they lost both arms. So they're working towards improving the lives of those people that are disadvantaged for whatever physical reason. And then Elon said, we believe we can do vision restoration because it's just a matter of going directly to the eyes. And he said, and why not make superhumans? Why not make infrared and radar just because we can? So with that kind of a mindset, you're looking to enhance the human body however way you can just because you can. But what ripple effect does that have to do with humanity? And if you get more of them out there, what does that create? Those questions haven't even been asked yet.
Yeah. Well, it's I've heard this term being thrown around or whispered, neo-humans, right? Or the beginning of a neo-human age, right? Or I think there are a couple other terms, but to me, it sounds like we're really at the dawn of maybe the end of humans, like Homo sapiens, as we've known ourselves for the last 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years. And there's this augmentation force that's coming our way that, it's gonna look. I'm not discrediting the benefits that people are going to get, whether they're paralyzed or blind or they have certain disabilities or whatever. That's fantastic, but that is always the sales point, if you want, to the greater population, which is going to be the place where whether it's Neuralink or many of these other companies, that's where the bulk of the sales are going to go. And they're for-profit businesses, so they're going to be going after that.
good for them, but there's also lots of societal ramifications for that. Yeah, maybe I'll just pass that over to you. Like, what are your thoughts on a like beginning of a neo-human race? Again, whether it's all of us or just some of us. I'm more than happy to hear your thoughts on that.
And that's where they're trying to drive it towards. And it's as Elon said, whoever can afford it, put in an application, and if you can afford it, you can have it. But that's the very beginning. As it becomes more mainstream, the price comes down, the capabilities increase, because their first implant, which was Nolan, to their second implant they just did a few days ago, there's more connections and they're deeper. So with Nolan, a number of the connections have come out because the brain pushed them out, but they found workarounds. So they've offset that with the second patient, where they put more and they put them deeper. But then you've got a company from Benjamin Rappaport, which is Precision Neuro, which slides a thin film under the skull onto the top of the brain and does an implant on the brain. And they've done 4 of these in one person. So that's over 4,000 connections to the brain. So you've got a lot more, and it's less invasive. You don't have, scar tissue and so forth. So we're in the infancy. We don't know which one is, or if either one is going to be mainstream, but we know that it's getting simpler, it's getting easier, they're getting more experience on it, and they're setting it up where it can be mainstream at some point in the future. And the question is, how long is that going to be? I mean, Neuralink is hoping to do 10 more. That's 12 in 1 year, and they did the first in January, and they're going to do 12 by December. That's a fast progression, right? And then we go beyond that. So what's the next year going to bring? And the next year? Because if they really get this down to a point that it works really well, and they get it passed through the FDA, then you've got a process that can be repeated, right? And it's perfected. And Precision's got this they've pretty much perfected it, because it slides in, it doesn't impact, yet they can get the information.
Yeah.
So it's hard to understand where it's going to go, but we know it's moving fast, and nobody can predict where it's going to be in 5 years. But I do believe that this will be mainstream within 5 to 10 years in some level.
Yeah.
To those that can afford it.
Yeah, and I think that's like, if for people listening, and I think that's maybe the most important thing to take away from all this, right? Because it's still right now sounds sci-fi, right? Like, think about 5 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Maybe, I mean, obviously a couple people, the people building it, and maybe some people in their periphery, but most people had no idea that these BCI kind of technologies were coming out. I mean, I'd heard about it many years ago, and I'd seen a video of a very, very early model where, there was this big thing sticking out of somebody's head, and they were able to move a robot arm. But it only kind of came back into my consciousness when I listened to a Joe Rogan episode with Elon Musk, and he was talking about Neuralink before it was going to be released. And he was talking about this technology that's going to, you can essentially control robot arms and all sorts of things, and merge with AI. But this point that it's not far away, I think it's absolutely essential for people to understand. Do you think that there's going to be people like you and me, people that don't have these kinds of disabilities that I would argue need this technology? Do you think that there's going to be a big desire to get these kinds of technologies, whether it's the simple one that's not invasive or the more invasive one? Do you think that the draw is going to be so large that people are going to get it, even though it's a surgery and it's not as simple as just having a phone in your hand? It's a little bit more invasive. Do you have a perspective on like how the culture sees that so far?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that people are going to want this because they can find a use for it, whether it be in business or whether it be in the personal life. But you've also got one company that puts nanobots in the blood and gets feedback that way that's non-invasive. And if it's in the blood, you can do anything in the body that you can connect with, right? So it's moving very quickly, and it's a matter of when it becomes affordable.
Right.
And that's really the break point. When it becomes affordable, then you start getting waiting lists. But until it becomes affordable, and it has to be deemed safe.
Yeah.
Right. Safe enough. And then you've got the affordability portion, and then you've got the first, the people that buy first, right? I want to be the first. And then you've got the second, then you get the mainstream that follows through.
Yeah.
So I think all this can happen in 10 years, and it may happen in 5. There's not enough data, even with data science, to put a time frame on this. It's just not reliable.
Yeah, but we know it's happened. Or we know it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's 5 to 10 years, yes. So you mentioned a little bit about the future of work and the impact on work here. I guess connected to that, you were just saying that there are going to be these early adopters that are going to be using this technology. Now, I have a pretty good computer setup here, right? Like I just spent a bunch of money. I got 4 monitors. I got this great computer, and I feel, whether it's true or not, but I feel like I'm 50% more productive. I've got ChatGPT up all the time. I'm using Midjourney and these other tools. I feel already a little bit augmented, and I know that I'm out competing some of my peers or some of my competitors because they're just on 1 screen or 2 screens and they're not using ChatGPT. So I'm able to move my little business's wheels a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. I can only assume that somebody with a Neuralink or this precision chip is going to be what, 200%, 300%, 100%. Like it almost doesn't even matter the percentage, but they're going to be more efficient than me with my lovely computer setup here. What are your thoughts? Well, one, what are your thoughts on that? And then connected to the future of work idea, if these early adopters get such a lead, right? If they get such a head start, will people be able to catch up, or will these people be able to build the next, $10 trillion business, and all of us are going to be laggards that don't have the money to buy this stuff right now?
Well, that's a very good question. And they were talking, Elon was talking the other day with some other people, and we talk at our talk rate, which is, it's about 100% for normal human beings. But if you bring that down to 75%, now the other person gets bored.
Right.
At the same time, if you bring it up to 150%, it's hard to comprehend everything that's being told, especially if it's a technical topic.
Mm.
So you've got this idea exchange, information exchange, and the human body is limited to a certain rate at which we can process information. An AI chip has no limits. So the more you can feed the body, which is brain in the chip, the more and the faster it can process and come up with solutions, ideas. So in reality, if you have a chip and you can bring in the information faster, process it faster, and then speak it faster and get it understood on the other side, those are people that have chips in them, because a human won't be able to comprehend that or work as fast.
Mm.
So when you start looking at the work environment, when you get to that level, that person's going to work on a computer, or he's going to work with somebody else that has that capability, because it's going to be difficult for them to work at their speed with the standard human. Now, I can see this happening in finances where you're trading, right?
Right.
Because they're already, but now it's there with the human.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can see it happening in actuaries, because it's happening there already, and in areas where you need to do a lot of computation quickly, and with probabilities, which is what the AI works with. So that's where I see the big impact. But with everybody in work, everybody's using AI right now, whether it be in an app on their phone they're using it. They just may not know that they're using it. I mean, Alexia and all those have AI built into them. Zoom has built into it. And it's funny, I was on a Zoom the other day, and as I was talking, the picture was going over here and over here. And I said, okay, this AI is not ready for Zoom yet.
Right.
But
yeah.
It's got to be ready. And I think depending on the work that you're doing, AI is going to replace some jobs, but you have the ability to learn about AI and then become more useful in that. I took an MIT course on AI, and I found it to be fascinating because I understand the back end of AI, which makes me smarter. But doing things like that is going to help people that have the potential of being replaced to be able to work with it instead of saying, well, let me learn that. Well, I already know something. Let's talk about that. Let's see what I know. And so in the vertical, people need to look at how is AI potentially coming in their vertical, and how can I get in on this to augment it versus fighting against it or just observing it.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing I want to backtrack a little bit on. Very interesting. You were saying these neo-humans, augmented humans, people with chips in their brains. I guess culture will figure out the proper term. They're only going to be able to work with other people like themselves because it's going to be too boring, too slow, too monotonous, and probably frustrating to work with people like you and me. To me, that sounds like the network effect with cell phones, with smartphones, right? It was a couple of people had a smartphone, and then a couple of years later, everybody had a smartphone, because if you weren't able to send messages with your friends, then you're the odd man out, and then you need that. So I think that's, this is just a comment here, but I think this is also something that people need to consider when looking at the timeline, whether it is 5 to 10 years. It might be 5 to 10 years like this, or I should say like this, flatline, or very, very low incline, and then all of a sudden, right? Because everybody's going to have to get it over the span of 2-3 years or something like that. That's actually pretty concerning when you think about it. Like it'll change us overnight.
And that's the reason that I'm writing this book, because people don't understand. They have an idea of AI, but they really don't understand how it's working, or how fast it's working, the advancements, and what they can do. And this is what I'm trying to bring out, because if you don't get in with this at whatever makes sense for you and where you work right now, in 3 to 5 years, you're going to be competing against somebody that has. So just to stay up, you've got to do this.
Yeah. No, I fully understand. I fully understand, and I fully agree. This is one of the things that I tell many of my clients that I try to help, just at a very basic level. Start using ChatGPT. It's like the internet, or it's like your smartphone or personal computer. Like if you're not using it, if you're not using any of those tools today, you're not very relevant in the workforce anymore. And it's going to be the same thing. Almost is right now. If you're not using, ChatGPT or Gemini or Cloud or Perplexity or any of these other bots, you can still do your work, but you're not as relevant as somebody, some 20-year-old kid in India or whatever that's able to use it right now. I do want to get to like the regulations and like maybe a bit of consciousness and stuff like that, but maybe that's a good segue right now. Like, how should businesses be thinking about this, apart from, okay, I need to think about this and I need to maybe hire somebody or 2 people with this, or are they going to take over my business because I'm going to be obsolete if they start, or like what are your thoughts on how this is going to be impacting businesses?
Well, that's a very good question. It's affecting businesses now, and it's just going to increase. So from my IT experience, you've got to start with AI, and it means you do a POC, make sure your infrastructure is chosen to be able to accept and handle whatever you can throw at it, because if not, you'll be replatforming in a few years. So you need to start with AI in something that will benefit your business, some aspect of it that's going to enhance your business. And then from there, you can expand on it and you can get familiar with it. And then with that, if you hire a fractional employee, or if you hire a consultant or somebody to work with you in the company, you can understand from a high level down to your level what's coming, where we are, where it's going, and for your particular vertical, what that means for you. And it's different for each company and it's different for each vertical. So they have to do what makes sense for them, because it's a dollar-cents game, what makes sense for them in their business. And then based on what works, progress on that. And some people need to get in, hard and heavy, depending on the industry they're in. And some people can just start and feel the way through. But if you don't, in a few years, you're going to be competing against the companies that did, and you're going to be the guy that's out.
Yeah. I think that's at a lower consciousness level. I think people understand this, right? No matter who you talk to, they're like, okay, yeah, if I don't start using, whether it's just a simple ChatGPT bot, I know that I know something's happening, and I know that if I'm not on this wave, then I'm going to be left behind. But it's about, I think, making people understand with higher resolution or more clarity about just how far behind they're going to be left if they're not using these tools,
or how far behind they are now. If they aren't, you've got to get where you are now and then assess it from there. And every company's at a different place, and they have to launch from there.
Yeah. I kind of want to move over to regulations and kind of larger scale problems with all this. Are there any other points for the future of work that you wanted to explain? Because I think I love that topic, so I'm always happy to throw it in again.
Yeah, and people know in the vertical that they're in, if AI is going to be able to enhance them with numbers and probabilities, or whether it's in some other way, or maybe in a lesser way. But take a look at that and really start to understand how that can happen. Do some research, and then get intelligent on that, because you can rise with it instead of it rising and you trying to catch up, because that's not a good position to be in.
Yeah, and I think as we discussed before recording, the speed at which all of this is changing. If you're trying to catch up in a year or two, good luck. I think that's going to be a real upward climb. You might just need to get some sort of BCI implant in order to just keep up with what's going on, right? That's a scary position.
Market.
Yeah, true. Okay, well, I don't necessarily like talking about regulations because, I come from a more libertarian background, family, friends, everything. But I think in this context, it's absolutely required. So with this ever changing, ever evolving, hyper quick revolution that I think we're going through, artificial intelligence, and then this new wave of BCI tech that's going to come about. How do you think about regulations? Like, just how required are they? Can government do it quickly enough for it to be relevant? There's probably a couple other questions that come up with that, but let's start there.
Well, it's a very good question, and it was just introduced in Congress last week, and it didn't get a lot of reception because it was Congress is Congress, right? They're focusing on what they focus on.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a nefarious part of this, right? You can use this for the good, which is where it is now. But you can also use it in a capitalistic way, or what's not great for humanity, but for one company or one person. And then when you get into international, you can start really getting conflict going with AI, and that's not a really good thing. That's not a good use of it. So I think for those reasons, we need to kind of try and rein it in, so that we focus on what's best for humanity, and what's not best for humanity, we take a second look at, because it doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means that we need a second look at it.
Yeah. In your book, do you mention any like countries that have had like successful regulations for like I don't know, maybe even like social media as an example then to use for AI? I don't know if there's any successful AI regulations out there now. Maybe I think it's still a bit too early. But in your book, do you touch on any of those points?
I do, and the UK seems to be further along than we are. They have some things in place. They're talking about it, but it's all very new everywhere. But to start is really the important part, because when you start, then you start making progress. Until you start, there's no progress.
Right.
We haven't started over here yet. Yet we're making extreme advancements. So it might take something that is not good to catch their attention, to say, hey, we need to do something about this. Or maybe they'll start to look at it, in a good way. Because when government comes in and regulates, it doesn't usually work out real well in the holistic view. But if they take an intelligent look at this and say, this is something that is very good in its place, and that we need to capitalize on this, and we need to make sure that we do this right, I think that's the best way to do it. Right now, it's really the Wild West. Whatever you can create, and there's no negative to it. And that's, with the advancements and the speed that we're going, that's a concern.
Yeah.
It only takes one.
Right. Yeah, and not to mention too much about how nation states are going to be interacting between each other, whether there's like competition for resources or land, or all these sorts of crazy things that we've been fighting over for generations and centuries.
Right.
Yeah, it's I think it is concerning. I think the thing I'm most concerned about is the speed at which regulators move, and it's I've been paying attention to cryptocurrencies for a couple of years now, and there's still no clear guidelines, and the community has been begging for those guidelines for years, right? And they're still not there. And I think AI moves a heck of a lot faster than cryptocurrencies. So yeah, my big concern is there is some need for some sort of regulation, but by the time it comes about, I think it might be too late. Or as you said, some of these larger corporations might be utilizing this stuff for their own benefit at the expense of whether it's communities or individuals or even nations. It's a very perilous time that we're living in. Very exciting, but very perilous at the same time.
And it is very exciting, and possibilities are better than they've ever been.
Yeah.
But the risks also increase with the possibilities. And we need to try and balance that and mitigate, the negatives. I have to believe that the people now that are working on it, that I've researched, seem to be going in a direction that is for the good. But, nothing stays on the same train forever. There's always one that takes a side train, side route. So until that happens, I think we're in good shape.
Sure. Maybe a bit of a silly kind of cheesy question, but I think it's also relevant given what we're talking about. What are you most excited about for the next couple of years in specifically artificial intelligence? And then what are you most concerned about? Are there like specific tangible things that, again, might help the audience and myself conceptualize this future move that we're going into a little bit better?
Well, I'm fascinated with the human and AI connection, because being conscious and so forth, I see the bridge for those two coming together, because I know both worlds, where I see possibilities that not everybody sees. It's just a matter of how we get there. We got one step on the bridge. We just haven't crossed it yet, but we will. And it's very likely that we're going to cross it with a human enhanced by AI, then AI gaining consciousness. I think that will come later if it ever happens, because we're looking at decades for that.
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah.
But once AI starts coding itself to develop itself, then that's the point that we start to compete with AI.
Right. And the most concerning point?
the most concerning point is if we do nothing, where may AI go? Which is, it could go anywhere, literally. We could go to the moon with it. Can't go anywhere.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, we got some 10 minutes left. So maybe, in the last segment of the podcast, I like exploring ideas that are a little bit further out there, right? Typically it's the future. We've kind of been focusing on that a lot. But you have a background in understanding consciousness a little bit better. So maybe we could explore that a little bit. And we touched on it before where, these augmented humans are going to be able to speak faster, think faster, I guess experience the world faster. I know that's a correct sentence, but I don't fully understand how that's going to happen. What is your perspective or your thoughts on, well, does that mean that consciousness is going to shift in these people? It's going to change. It's going to alter fundamentally in one way if they're getting more data than you and I are every single day?
That's a great question. Now, you remember with Nolan, the first implant, he was able to work the computer through telekinesis just by thinking about it. He could move the cursor and it was winning.
Yeah.
We all have that innate ability. I've done some low-level things with that, but I haven't spent a lot of time on it. But if I could just automatically work my computer without touching it, that would make my life more efficient, right?
For sure.
And I think AI, based on that, can help us experience the things that are innate to us, such as when we sleep, we go to another realm when we come back. With AI, if we can connect the right parts in the brain or the pineal gland, we can actually go beyond that on the first try because we're activated. Right? So it's fascinating what AI can do to what we have. And if you're going to do the Kundalini unwinding, you could just set it to do that. It's a very dangerous thing. I mean, if you're not ready for it, that can kill you. So you have to be ready for it, but you could do that. You could all of a sudden be more aware. My meditation, I've had a number of experiences that are out of this world, right? And that's a whole other topic. But I've experienced all this. And then with AI, I see the possibilities for the good or for the bad of that enhancing the body. And maybe if more people are aware, right, and awakened, maybe the world will be a better place because they're thinking in a more holistic view, a more inclusive view than a division view, which is thinking now. And that is, we label hot and cold, good and bad. We've been doing that forever. But when you're awake, you take the holistic approach and you say good and bad are the same things. They're just different degrees of each, right? Same with hot and cold. You look at the world differently and you look at it more of an inclusive perspective. So I think AI that can help awaken more people, even though it's not how it would naturally happen, I think that would be a happier and better world for humanity because it changes the perspective from an egocentric, which is division and I want to win, to a holistic, which is we all win, we're all in for the same thing.
It's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. I'll have to think about this a little bit more. But the thing that came to my mind was with the divides that we're seeing now, accentuated more than ever, and I think a lot of it is through social media, right? Whether it's left or right, Republican, Democrat, or men and women. There's all these divides that we're experiencing throughout society. I'd never thought that AI might be the answer or the solution. I don't want to say the panacea, but maybe a part of the solution if it expands consciousness and makes us able to empathize with the other side a little bit better. Because I think a big part of the divide is just not understanding what the other side is, right? And if you're limited in your mental bandwidth and you can only really have say a couple hours a day or a couple hours a week to think about these larger issues. And it's just so easy to just think, well, okay, I'm just, I'm not American. I mean, Canada, but I'm only going to think about Trump, or I'm only going to think about Biden or Kamala right now, and then you just ignore the other side and just listen to whatever media pundit or whatever is saying about the other person. But if you have an increased amount of bandwidth, well, one, I guess you could take in more propaganda from one side or the other, but then you might be able to be like, oh, well, I've got an hour. Why don't I spend the next, I don't know, 10,000 internal hours, right, within 1 hour to listen to the other side. And then you might come out of it like, oh, well, this side's got good points. This side's got good points. Why are we fighting about this? Very interesting.
Yeah. And I'm pretty much in the middle.
Yeah.
Right now.
Sure. Yeah. I've heard that a bunch. Yeah.
So I understand that. And I see the path, but you have to be at a different level to be able to do that as the norm, right?
Is it? Yeah, no, very, very interesting. I'll definitely have to think about this a little bit more. What about the next couple of years, maybe beyond 10 years or something like that? If we're saying BCI is going to be maybe not ubiquitous, but it's going to be commonplace in 10 years, right? There's been this idea proposed by Elon for the most part of BCI technology is the technology to enable AI and humans to merge. So, I mean, it's kind of connected to what we were talking about before, but is there, do you agree with that? Do you think that's nonsense? Do you think it's the solution to stop us from fighting some sort of, AI Terminator race that, people have been talking about for a while? What are your thoughts on that? And understand that this is a little bit further out in the future and very speculative.
I think that Elon's technique where they put pins in the brain, that may or may not prove out. But there are other areas that have promise that don't do that. So I think we'll see this within 10 years. It will be commercially available. And I think it will be sooner than 10 years, but for me to put a guess on that, it just factors. I just say within 10 years, I think it's going to be here.
Yeah.
But I think that done right, it's going to improve humanity and it's going to enhance the good things that we want to enhance. And as you know, it starts with a small group, right? And then it expands. And then if it catches on, then more people pay attention and say, hey, I like their views. So you only need a couple. And if one can get up to a point of leadership, then they start talking in that way. People start to gravitate to what makes sense. And then if it becomes mainstream and more people get to an expanded consciousness, then you've got a calmer, just a better, happier, more balanced world. And we could do that on our own, but it's going to take us a long time to get there. AI may be able to help us get there in a good way, but the jury's out on it. I can see that happening. I just don't have the long-term effects. And that's the only piece that's missing right now.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a good place to end the discussion. I mean, I have probably another 20 questions to ask. I could talk about this topic all day long. I think I'll definitely have to have you back on the podcast, Bruce. You have your book coming out in the fall. So I'll have the links that you sent to the website and of course your LinkedIn up on the show notes. Are there other places that you want people to check out the book or follow what you're doing, read what you're writing?
Well, thank you, Mark. I've got either it's up there now or it will be soon, an email address. So if you want to get notice of the book when it comes out, I can do that. And the LinkedIn is the best way until the full website gets up, which should be within the next 30 days.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I think it's probably one of the most important discussions for us as a species to have. So I'm really appreciative that you came on to continue the discussion, start it for some, continue it for others. Thanks again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast.
The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.